Hello everyone, I am here with a story. I thought this one sounded like a really good one. It's a true story, short story. It's called God Told Her So by Ginger Davis Gettle. So let me read it to you guys. I'm going to die, aren't I? I said to my husband. Bob pulled his chair close to my hospital bed and took my hand. You have to have another operation, he said. Maybe two. The tests after your stroke show you have 2 weak spots in your arteries and your brain. If they're not repaired, you'll have another stroke. He didn't add that stroke will be fatal, but I knew that's what he meant. I pulled my hand away. How much will it cost? His voice sank to a whisper. About $250,000, he said, or more. I closed my eyes and sank against my pillow. $250,000, when we barely had enough to pay the grocery bills. And even if we had the money, I was so traumatized by the thought of surgery that I couldn't imagine going through it. Plus, I had a history of health problems, ulcers, allergic reactions, unusual complications after other medical procedures that didn't bode well for any operation, much less a complicated one. What happens if I don't have the surgery, Bob? I asked. I'll die, won't I? Bob didn't answer. Instead, he moved onto the edge of the bed and put his arms around me, but I barely felt him. This is it, I thought, the end of my life, and the end of a year filled with one devastating event after another. The past year in Houston had been terrible for us. Oil prices had plunged, and Bob had been laid off from his job on an offshore oil rig. He'd looked for work steadily, but nothing had come up. Meanwhile, his unemployment checks had stopped, and our savings had dwindled away. Next, we learned Bob's mother had Alzheimer's disease, and his father had a malignant tumor. Bob and I moved in with Mom and Pop to care for them. Foolish as it was, we put off getting health insurance, and we didn't have a cent to spare. And Bob would be getting a job any day now, or so we thought. I too was in a downward spiral of sinking spirits and increasing health problems. And then this. When I woke one morning in late November, my right leg and arm was strangely asleep. My mouth couldn't form words. I managed to throw myself out of bed and into the hall, and then I collapsed. I was rushed to the hospital. For 2 weeks I couldn't talk or communicate. I had never been so frightened. I went through a series of exhausting tests, and now Bob was telling me the results. Without the money, no operation. Without the operation, no life. Then I'll just die, I said. His arms tightened around me, but I pulled away. As much as I loved him, I wanted him to leave. Go home, I said. You need to rest. Slowly, he pulled on his jacket. After he left the room, it was silent. Thank goodness the other bed is empty, I thought. I couldn't stand to have anybody else near me. There was the squish of rubber-soled shoes in the corridor. I turned my head to see a wheelchair roll in, pushed by a smiling nurse. Good news, Mrs. Gettle. You're having company, she said. A roommate. That was all I needed. I watched grudgingly as a slender woman was helped out of the chair and into the adjoining bed. She had a pleasant face, framed by a soft gray hair. Hello, she said, looking over at the nurse, adjusted covers. I'm Flossie. Hello, I said wearily. What are you here for? Flossie's voice was warm and friendly, but I was in no mood for talking. Terrasley, I explained my physical condition. When are they going to fix you up? Flossie asked. Never, I thought to myself, choking back tears. There are some problems, I said. We can't afford the surgery. As the nurse turned to go, I asked her to pull the curtains around my bed. I'd like some privacy, I said weakly. The curtains rattled on the rod, then closed around me like a tent, and Flossie vanished out of sight. Vaguely, I heard muffled conversation about a mysterious attack that Flossie had had that evening. Her husband had rushed her to the hospital, and she had been kept overnight for observation, but I paid little attention to what was going on. I curled up in misery. I'd always been a Christian person. My mother was a minister, and I had gone through all the right motions and participated in all the right church activities, but I felt totally abandoned. How would my husband cope when I was gone? Who would take care of Mom and Pop? Fear swirled in terrifying profusion. The words sounded in my mind with every breath I took. You'll die, you'll die, you'll die. I fell into a heavy, churning sleep. Mrs. Gettle, wake up, a voice called. A hand shook my shoulder gently, but firmly. The curtains that shrouded my bed had parted. A form leaned over me, silhouetted against the eerie glow of a small nightlight in the corridor outside. What's wrong? I mumbled. Nothing's wrong, honey, said a rich, gentle voice. I have a message for you from God. From God. It was Flossie. She had left her own bed and was standing next to mine. I've been praying about you, she said, and God spoke to me clear as a bell. He said, tell this lady I'm going to give her surgery, and it's going to be successful. She patted my hand. Now don't you worry about another thing. You'll live. With a terrible tremble in the curtains, she was gone. I lay staring at the glowing hall light, the small clock on the bedside table. It was 2:30 in the morning. I was filled with an overwhelming sense of peace. The hammering, negative voice in my head stopped. It was replaced with a fresher, calmer voice. You'll live, you'll live, you'll live. I drifted back to sleep. I slept better than I had in months. The next month, I was released from the hospital. I was told that short of having the necessary surgery, nothing further could be done for me. As I packed my things to go home, Flossie smiled from the next bed. It will be all right, honey, she said, with such conviction that it was impossible to doubt her. God told me so. Bob looked at me strangely as he drove me home. It was good to see you go cheerfully, he said, especially since you don't feel well. Don't feel well? After months of illness and depression, I was feeling better and better instead of slumping down onto my bed the way I might have done a few days ago. I had the urge to get busy in the house, maybe even to check in with the neighbors and see what had happened since I'd been away. You'll live. God will give you your surgery. I saw my neighbor's car pass by the window and pull into the driveway next door. My neighbor, Dr. Howard Derman. I'd say hello to him over the fence, but that was all. But suddenly it hit me that he was a neurologist. He'd know more about what they told me in the hospital. I was out the door before my astonished husband could ask where I was going. Dr. Derman was at the kitchen table having breakfast. I told him about my diagnosis and asked him to explain. He drew on his napkin to illustrate. There was 2 weak places in my arteries that bulge out, he explained. If they aren't repaired, they can blow out, just like a weak spot on a tire. He went into more detail about the surgery, then asked who would be doing it. No one, I said. I can't afford it. He looked thoughtful for a moment, then began asking questions about Bob and me and our finances. I'm affiliated with a local hospital, he said. On a previous visit there, I'd been told I wasn't destitute enough to qualify for special assistance. It just seems to me, he went on, that if ever 2 people needed special funding, it's you and Bob. Let me see what I can do. It's hard to believe what happened next. Since my case was so unusual, the doctors asked if my operation could be filmed for teaching and research purposes, and the hospital would pay all charges. Is that what Flossie's incredible statement meant? Tell this lady I'm going to give her surgery. Bob couldn't get over how calm I was as they rolled me toward the operating room, clutching a piece of paper bearing the words, "Let not your heart be troubled," John 14:1. I went through nearly 9 hours of complicated surgery to repair the first aneurysm, and it all went smoothly. Within a few days, I was up and walking in the halls. The doctors were amazed at my quick recovery. Ordinarily, they would have sent me home for a few months to recover and regain my strength for the second operation, but I felt so strong and confident that I said, "Let's go ahead now." Only 13 days later, I had another long operation, and 4 days after that, I was out of intensive care and walking toward the wards. When they commented on how well I was coping, I gave the explanation I'd given from the first. "Oh," they said, laughing, "you're back to 'God gave me the surgery,' are you?" But I could tell they were impressed. What turned me around from a timid, fear-filled person to a confident, lively one, a lot of people would say it was the power of suggestion, and I agree. God's suggestion passed on by one of his faithful messengers and given to a desperate woman deep in despair in the middle of the night. How did the messenger happen to be in the bed next to mine? Fateful night. That's one of the mysteries for the doctors, never to find out anything wrong with Flossie. They never found anything wrong with Flossie. She went home fine, Flossie did. And she stayed fine. I know because Flossie and I have been fast friends ever since. When I woke up you that night, Flossie once said, "You must have wondered what on earth got into her." And then she said and laughed because we knew it was nothing on earth at all. Most doctors do not believe in God. When you mention God to them, they don't want to believe it. It's like 99% of doctors don't believe in God. I hate that. I hate it so much, but they don't believe in God. So I hope you guys enjoyed that story, and I hope you guys have a good night. Bye, guys.